And yeah, it says we're live, so I guess we are. I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds, but thank you very much for joining me. I know that probably nobody's going to join us yet. I'll put the links out in the different communities, but yeah, Joanne, thank you very much for Thursday and for the training. I know a lot of people didn't know quite what to expect, and obviously having gone through very kind of used to doing, the training that they've seen so far was very, this is how you do it. This is how you do it on this side. Yours much more of a mindset thing, but both in terms of what I can see with how many people were there live, and also just the feedback that was in the chat about this was what people were looking for. It really came over well. What was your kind of, what was your feel of, like, I know you followed the chat a bit about doing the presentation. What did you feel about the training on Thursday?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed delivering it. It's we live in this Black Mirror world now where everyone's presenting at the same screen, and my audience looks about this big as a little camera on top of my screen. So it's really, really hard when you're in this virtual environment to get any audience feedback. And I guess we are so focused on the chat, sorry, the delivering session, the chat is kind of over here. So I really didn't do any more than glance from time to time. But I suppose what I did get was right at the end, all of the questions I could see there, the conversations that were forming, and the debates that were going on between people as part of the session outside of me talking. They were engaging themselves and challenging each other, which I thought was really fantastic. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And we did get a lot of questions in the Q&A as well. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't have a lot of time to kind of answer them directly there. But also, I want to present Sarah because diversity sourcing is something I enjoy and I love doing, but I don't feel comfortable actually answering a lot of the technical questions about how to or mindset around that. So I brought in my friend Sarah. So yeah, Sarah, maybe a little bit about you, who you are, especially if people haven't seen my interview with you from I think a year and a half ago. A bit about who you are and where you are.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I am in Chicago right now, quarantining by Lake Michigan, and I do a lot. So when I think about it, I don't think of like, hey, I'm going to do, it's like Friday is my diversity sourcing day. I think I work at a recruiting agency, so pure sourcing is basically everything that I do, and I just want to make sure every step of the way I'm always doing, keeping diversity and inclusion at the top of my mind. So it's not like, hey, this is a special thing I'm doing sometimes, but really something that I'm doing all the time, and I'm happy to talk about actual strategies and tactics that I use to make sure I'm always sourcing inclusively.
Excellent. Yeah, maybe we can jump straight into some of the questions that was upvoted and that came in the Q&A section of the Crowdcast on Thursday. I know we had a little bit of a talk before about this. The first question where somebody said, look, in my company, we just hired everybody. We're open to everybody. We don't focus on that. We have people with physical disabilities, men, women in high positions. We treat candidates as equal, but we don't focus on things like we need to hire a woman or something like that. If somebody's good, we just hire him or her. Is that a good attitude?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes is the easy answer. Yeah. But if we unpick some of that question, so we treat everybody equal. What we have to do is recognize that some people need more help, whether they have a physical disability, they have accessibility needs, they come from maybe an underrepresented community. So we have to recommend treating people equal, i.e. treating people the same. It's not a great place to start. So we have to give people what's called equity. Equity means giving people the tools and the adjustments to help allow them to succeed. So treating people the same, whilst it may be a semantic in English, it's about equity and giving people the tools. And I would also say it's also about how your organization's culture and how the employee experience as a whole maps out. Because yes, it's great to employ lots of different people from whatever background and give them the tools they need to succeed. But if the culture isn't right, then what will happen is people will walk out the back door. So it's important to look at your stats, your demographics of not only who you're hiring, but who gets promoted, who achieves, who has pay rises, how their appraisals are, as well as the demographics of people who leave. Because what you might end up with is a mismatch between your employer branding and who you think you are, and actually the real employee experience. So yes, great attitude. hiring people for their merit and their skills is fantastic, but making sure that you have the culture and values inside the organization to make them thrive.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it sounds a bit like it's a cop out. It's like, we don't really want to take a decision on what diversity means for us. So we'll just have that, well, we're inclusive. We don't, we don't see color, we don't see creed, we don't see sexuality. It's like, no, but what does your diversity look like? What does your company look like? If you could have that. It's like, oh, I work with people in Brazil, and they're like, no, we have men, we have women, but they realize it's like, we're not representing our country. Like, with 50% Black people in Brazil, the people working in the company were not. They were 50% Black, whether that was male or female. So that was just one of the things. It's just like, we can feel that, we have all kinds of sexualities, we have men, we have women, and we have disabilities. But if you're not representing what you want the company to look like, and that could very well be the country as a whole, that was one of the things that they could see that they needed to work on. So I think it comes just as much into that, really dig down deep and see, what does our diversity look like in our company, and do we focus on the right things? And whether that is, yes, we hire everybody who's the best for the roles, it's like, that might be, but if the people who are taking those decisions on who the best for the roles are all the same, then you're going to have bias no matter what you do.
Yeah, but I think we're going to be careful we don't focus on diversity as the only thing.
No.
It's about creating an inclusive experience for all people.
Yeah.
But then, because that way you start to value the person for who they are. So to say, I don't see color, I don't see your sexuality, I don't see your gender, is actually quite insulting. I want you to see my sexuality. I want you to see my gender identity. People want to be seen as a Black person, to celebrate their culture and their values. Because what that means is then, because you're valuing who I am, my entirety of who I am, I can bring that element of my background, my lived experience to work with me, and I can put it to use. So hiring people for diversity just for diversity's sake is kind of tokenistic. But if what you're saying is, I want our organization to be relevant and representative of society, of our customer base, who we want to market to, who we want to buy our products, then I need to make sure I've got people in my organization that understand our marketplace, understand our suppliers, understand the world. That's where the power of diversity comes in, the power of thinking from different lenses, from different lived experiences. So there's an outcome to the why of diversity is the inclusion element and the utilization of that broad lived experience in the entirety of our business, not just around, have I got enough men, have I got enough women?
Yeah, and also don't forget non-binary people. This was a really binary, they're more than just men and women. I know, not a reminder necessarily for people on the call, but for people watching, that whenever you say like, oh, we've got both men and women, just sort of be mindful of language there.
All genders.
All genders, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I think kind of going on that as well. The next question that was kind of upvoted was how to write an unbiased message. Any tech that you found that helps?
Yeah, so the first one that comes to mind obviously is going to be Textio. That can be really expensive, sometimes more than a LinkedIn recruiter seat, depending on how many job postings you've got. So there are also some crowdsourced available ones. Kat Matfield has one that I don't know the best way to share a link. Maybe I'll just share that with Mark after. There's like genderdecoder.katmatfield.com or .net. Don't quote me on that. Just try.
I'll put it in the YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes. So yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, try your search engine of choice. We'll pop that up. And that's just something to sort of strive for balance. There's all this research that says that if sometimes women or people from marginalized backgrounds are like more likely to apply only if they hit 100% of the qualifications, or they'll be turned off from roles. I know personally, like I've seen, hey, we're seeking like a sourcing guru, and I'm like, oh, that's not me. So to sort of think of like where you can use actual simple words that people know what they mean, instead of trying to put in as much jargon as possible, even if you don't have one of these tools available.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's get rid of all of the desirables. It would be nice if you could. And it's, what do you need to do? I need you to be able to talk, write, code, and communicate as part of the team. and describe that. It doesn't matter whether you've got a car, whether you can drive, what your gender is, whatever. So just the basic core elements that will encourage people, and as you said, Sarah, avoid gendered language, and maybe build some inclusive features into your JDs. So your value proposition as an employer. So you've got childcare, you've got vouchers, you've got flexible working, you've got all this kind of stuff. In fact, even work from home, if as we do at the moment. Or maybe,
I feel like everyone has work from home, or everyone in certain industries, I guess, a lot of people.
So yeah, so when you're writing a bias message, focus also on the value add you have as an employer, to the attractive features that, again, people who are underrepresented may look at those attractive features more heavily as well.
Absolutely. The next upvoted question was how to ask a candidate about diversity in the most polite and tolerant way. I've heard questions like, are you a diverse candidate? Does this sound okay? Thank you in advance.
Yeah, I personally would avoid language like that, especially, I don't know the laws of wherever you're operating. I know this is a very broad audience right now, but in the US especially, like even companies who need to collect data for the Equal Opportunity Employment Office, like they need to collect that data and keep it separate from someone's someone's like actual application. So I'd be really, really careful with something like that. And it doesn't sound right in English sometimes. So I would instead do more of what Joe was saying of like putting out information. If you can put up like an FAQ about, hey, interviewing through us, or I have the agency background, or interviewing at our company, if you're an internal recruiter, that says like, hey, here are the accommodations that we have, here's things that we've already thought about, here's what you can do, so you can prove that you've done a little bit of thought into creating a really good environment once people get there, would be better than sort of just asking point blank, like, are you a diversity candidate?
I prefer open, well, I like to see open questions, something like, is there anything we can do to make your experience better? You know, if you're coming for an interview, blah, 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 you put all the usual stuff, our address, and the bottom it just says, is there anything we can do to help your experience or to give you a better chance of succeeding? And you don't ask anything more than that. And if someone maybe had a sensory maybe they're deaf or blind, or maybe they're dyslexic, or they have some need, they may well say to you that actually I could do with some help if I'm filling in, I can't use a pen maybe, but I might need some help, or I have dexterity with limited ability to move my arms, so don't ask me to do anything, I have to. So you may, that's not you asking them if they have something, that's them volunteering it, so they will make sure they get a better experience from the process. Otherwise, the first thing that happens, they come through the door, or they come through for the interview, and it may go wrong because you haven't banked on somebody. You may have thought, oh, okay, if they're a wheelchair user, we've got a disabled lift or something, and then you find out that the button to operate the lift is here, and you've assumed that anybody who is a wheelchair user would come with a personal assistant or a carer. And this person is independent and they don't have a carer or a personal assistant with them, so they can't access the button, or they can only reverse into the lift. So it may well be they say, I would like someone to be on hand to help me access facilities while I'm with you. And again, that is all part of asking that question without saying directly, do you have a disability? What you're saying is, do you have any requirements that I can help you with?
I like that, definitely. And I think definitely for me, like, it wouldn't be the kind of way that I would think about it. So yeah, it definitely, and especially when you come to the interview process and just think like that, because I find a lot that you come to the kind of thing, it's like, oh, I shouldn't ask, but I think, and I think I'm on the right, that I have the right kind of idea of, how this person identifies, or, whatever it is. But as you say, like, just asking, like, is there anything that we need to do, or that we can help, like, that we can do to help you to accommodate an interview? We should ask everybody that, regardless of whether we think it's that, that's an inclusion question or not. But because we more have something that just, that rocks us the wrong way in an interview process. So I definitely like that, and think everybody should take that as part of their kind of general screening and interviewing process.
And I think it's important for people to have a plan B. And what I mean by that is, you can't cover every single angle, every single situation. What you can do is you can make a really good middle ground guess on everything. But if someone arrives and for whatever reason your plan A doesn't work, what is your plan B? So it's again being very person centric and saying, look, this isn't going to work for you. What can we do right now to make this experience go well? It may well be we pull up a desk and a chair in reception, or we go to a coffee shop, we do something to make it work for you, to make your experience fantastic. And when we're talking about this, it's always about ask the person, what can I do to make it work for you? And again, if you ask it in that kind of way, people will say, thank you, I really appreciate that. It would be helpful if we could do this instead. And you go, yep, we'll figure out, bear with me, give me 10 minutes, we'll make that work. But it's when people give you that blank look and go, oh my God, how we can't do anything. That's when discrimination, the bias will kick in. So if we can avoid that lack of plan B, that's what's going to give people a positive experience.
Definitely, I like that. The next kind of upvoted question was, I'm interested in your opinion when a company says we need more women or women only for this role. Yet on the other hand, I speak to a lot of candidates who are women who say, I don't want to be hired just because I'm a woman. And I think that comes from any way how you identify. It's almost as tough companies that have these diverse quotas to fill, and when a whole topic kind of implodes. Or does it simply come down to a company not wanting to look discriminatory as they accidentally don't have enough diversity? But love this session topic.
There's like a lot to unpack in that question. It was like 20 questions, it seems like. I will say that like if you've got a company that just like accidentally doesn't have a lot of diversity, so it's going to be really hard to recruit people who maybe are not if you've got, hey, this is basically a frat house, like there are a lot of people who just aren't going to want to join the frat house. Not to pick on frat houses. But I think like it's I think something that comes from like not being intentional about how you're building an inclusive team like from the get-go. And I would kind of want to see like, hey, what inclusion work have they already done so that when someone comes here, it's not something they need to like leave screaming. I do think that like the way that I think about it is like, I'm never looking for like just someone from like a specific background for a role. I'm just looking in a lot of places and might happen to be looking in places that tend to have, let me think of like the best way to say this. Like if I know that a company or a school or a program is like famous for not being a very inclusive company or school, I'm going to make sure that I'm also looking at places that have more diverse populations like right in there, or more inclusive populations. So sort of think like, where can you start looking somewhere? I guess I don't typically have like, hey, this one person for this one role needs to meet this one requirement, because that seems like a little bit difficult to me, just thinking like, how would you do that? I'm not sure if that was like a good answer or not, but
no, I think
so much going on in this question.
Especially if you worked for some of the big multinational tech companies, you will have, which I have been on those teams where it's like this search is senior executive has to be female because we have a 30% female hire quota, and this manager isn't going to be allowed to hire anything until they fill that quota. So you do, like, especially internal teams, that's not necessarily something that gets communicated broadly, but I know it happens because I've seen it in a lot of multinational tech companies. So, that's kind of where a lot of this kind of comes from. It's, this is a role for female only, but you're not going to communicate that anywhere, but especially the sourcing teams know that's like, look, if we present anything else, even if it's, a diverse candidate, but if that manager doesn't think that that person identifies as female, they're not gonna get the job. I think that's where that kind of question comes from.
My take on that is just reading that. I've read it several times while you've been speaking. I don't want to be hired because I'm a woman. So let's look back in history. How many people have been hired because they're a man? Lots. How many people have been hired because they're white? Lots. How many people have been hired for being white, male, and straight? Lots. Do they complain that they're getting hired for being a man, white and straight? No. So let's say to ourselves, it's time for change. There's time for change. So yes, it may seem a bit tokenistic. Yes, it may seem that way. So let me talk back to the company. What are you trying to achieve? What you're trying to achieve by saying we want to hire more women, what you're saying is we've got a place there that has no diversity of thought. We've got a monoculture here. So let's think about the message. We want to hire women because we want to make sure that our company is more diverse because. So I can look at it and go, okay, so I understand that you've got many men in the organization, you've got many white men. So why you want me is because you're valuing the perspective, the things I bring to the organization, not just because I'm a woman, but because I think like this, I act like this, my ethnicity is this, and the people I hang out with, my representation of customers, my design ideas, et cetera, et cetera. So you're not hiring me just because of my genitals, you're hiring me because of I bring a different part up here. And I think if you engage with people intellectually with a why, then they're far more likely to see it more positively.
I like that, definitely. And well, we're never going to get, a lot of these companies are not going to change because a lot of it is just internal politics. And it's like, yes, ideally, we would have a fair split on sexuality, on, you know, color and things like that in every kind of organization, especially when you get to a large, large organization. But I think as Sarah said as well, maybe you're too late to the game. When you're early in a company's history, like when you're in that kind of startup and scale up phase, are you putting the right processes and things in place that it's an inclusive culture in the company, or are you just hiring, you know, your mates from college that all went to the same, you know, school, went to the same gym, you know, were rowing on the same team, whatever that kind of is in your country? Like, do you have an inclusive culture to begin with so that you don't end up with, you know, being 1,000 people and only 100 of them are what you consider diverse candidates?
Yeah, and like just really importantly, like bringing people into toxic cultures when they don't realize that there's a toxic culture is not a great thing. Put it very kindly.
I mean, I've been in an interview process where they were interviewing women, but they also knew that they didn't have anybody in that department that could, you know, make them feel welcome. So they were pulling in female senior executives from other departments so that at least there could be somebody on the interview process that could, you know, make it look like there was people in the department. And it's kind of like, yeah, you don't want to be the token woman on a development team if the processes, if the whole kind of team culture is not set up for that. I've seen some really, you know, some really cool teams where that they just got that right from the beginning. But I've also seen some really toxic teams. So it's like, I wouldn't recommend anybody to join that team if they were not, you know, white, straight men, because they just wouldn't have a good time and, you know, wouldn't last long there either.
But I think what you can do is you can be very honest when as part of the process. You can say, look, we know where we are today isn't great. So one of the strengths in our job spec is resilience, or is a culture change as a key element. So we're looking for a developer who's resilient and has worked in an organization where culture change is happening or something. I don't know, however you'd phrase that. But be honest and say, look, we actually want someone who can come into an environment, can fit in a bit with the way things are, and help lead us into the way things should be. And there are plenty of people out there that work for big companies that have been through this. So I think just to say that where we are, what we can't do is bias against the people who are incumbent. There may be a hell of a lot of people who are there who want to change the culture as well, and that they don't have somebody, if you like, they can do it with. So yeah, be honest. Bring women, bring black people, bring whoever you need to do as part of the interview process to show that you've got representation of different voices, and then do something about it. It may well be you need to move something internally for a while to handle this, or make change. But to say we can't and have no plan B is ridiculous. You have to think of what can you do and focus on what you can do, and then you can do a bit more. The nudges and things like this. You can do lots of things at a little bit of time.
Yeah, I love your point about honesty and just being like completely open and transparent about like, hey, this is what's going on. I think a lot of people sort of get into their heads that like, oh no, we can never tell anyone what's going on. And that I could just see backfiring really badly.
I see this, and the phrase that I use is, all of the employer branding is not actual game footage, is it? It's like demo mode. The mirror are bigger than they appear, but it's all airbrushed out. It's all kind of sanitized.
I think we had the discussion online today as well. It was like the stock photos of a diverse slate of people staring at one computer, and what was the other one as well that people wanted banned, where you have that, that there's 5 people and there's one of each color and male and female balance, and
everyone's like shaking. There's like 5 hands that are just like going in like a weird circle.
Do you remember, I mean, you might be a bit young for this, both of you, the Airplane, the movie with the airplane crash, and they got, and it's all like there's a nun there playing guitar, then there's a black vicar, then it's almost like they were taking they were really parodying the fact that in this movie they had to have everybody playing some sort of stereotype trope within the airplane. It was kind of, but often that's what we feel we have to have. We have to have so much representation that it becomes fake and false. So it's got to be real people, real employers proud to work there. If they're not proud to work there, why aren't they proud to work there?
Yeah, and that comes back to the inclusion. What are we? Are we actually fostering an environment where everybody will feel at home? I think this leads a bit on that as well. Writing job ads is always talked about, but only 10% about how technical sourcers find candidates. How do we make sure that we are being inclusive via our direct outreach? I think, Sarah, that's definitely something we deal with a lot.
That's my bread and butter. I think like the thing to do is to pay attention to where you're looking, like what pools are you looking in, and like what, a lot of times, even if you can't find like, hey, this individual person's information, like if you're sourcing on the internet, a lot of times people are using pseudonyms and they're nothing's like related to their real identity. So like you wouldn't even try to guess what someone's demographics might be. But you want to think like, okay, so if I'm going to spend some time sourcing on Reddit, which like I do, people do post on Reddit, it's a great place to look, but I'm also going to sort of keep in mind in the back of my head, like, oh yeah, Reddit can be extremely, extremely toxic to people who don't have like certain beliefs. So I want to make sure that I'm also doing, looking through places that I know are going to be more inclusive. So it doesn't really, for me, it doesn't usually come down to like, hey, here's like this one, like, I'm not usually doing it by like, here's each person that I'm reaching out to and guessing like what their demographics information might be.
You mean like, you're not posting in the young conservative subreddit?
When I hire on Reddit, it's on r/jabs, and I usually do not pay attention to what other places people are posting. I don't want to know anyone's political affiliations. There's no reason to. But like also sort of looking outside of that and thinking like, hey, where else are you looking? Are you looking in places that are known to be more inclusive? And then like another thing that I always like to do or try to do is pushing back on qualifications that people say like, oh, we will only pull from our competitors. And I'm like, well, if your competitors are all 95% men, you're not going to find someone like, if you do find the 5%, I guess men was like just a random example, white, you can pull in whatever information you're looking for. But like if everyone working at your competitors looks the same and you're only pulling from your competitors, you're not moving the needle in any way. You're just sort of moving people from like one box to another box. So sort of thinking like, what will you accept people from untraditional backgrounds? Like, do they really need a CS degree to build the front page of your website? Things like that, where you can push in and say, well, only X%, like, if you can say, oh, well, we're only hiring people from MIT, you're like, well, MIT has a really public, really terrible, toxic person who is on faculty for years and years and years. What are you doing to catch people that like might have been pushed out from that degree?
I never chose to even apply for MIT for exactly that reason.
Yeah. So really pushing back on things that are going to be blockers is some of the best that you can do.
For certain companies that have staff networks, ERGs, whatever you want to call them, walk down, sit down, buy a coffee for somebody, and say, look, can I run my JD by you? Can I run my ad by you? And just diversify the opinions, looking at what your collateral and stuff. Reach out to your friends. I mean, thinking, expand your circle of friends, expand your base, and ask people, where would they go if they were looking for something like this? Where would their friends go? What kind of friends would look for this kind of job? Or objectively, why wouldn't people be interested in this role? What is it about our company that this demographic would not be excited by? And as a sourcer, as a hirer, you maybe can't influence that, but at least you can start being realistic about the content of the JD, the language around the ad, where you're posting it. Okay, well, if you're a multinational hiring, you're hiring out of territory, then you've got to use local knowledge to get a feel for language and all those things. But if you're hiring in a local vicinity, go and find out social clubs, look at Facebook groups for the area, look at what people hang out in those, ask questions. Say, I'm doing some research on why people from minority backgrounds don't get hired in this town, and do some actual private research and say, look, this is a job switch. What do you think of it? And you may get some feedback. So you can be a bit more long-term, rather than think about this as a short-term thing. Do some long-term games and strategies. So as a sourcer, you build up your own thing, but maybe as a department or a company thing, you can influence these kind of ideas. Because if you're trying to tackle people that are hard to reach, you've got to find out where those people that are hard to reach hang out and what they like. It's not that big a leap of mind to understand that if I'm looking for somebody who is green, I hang out where green people go and then find out what green people like. It's kind of that simple, really.
Absolutely. The next one is working in a staffing organization where I cannot talk to the hiring manager due to the industry. How can I challenge the status quo? I think, Sarah, you're probably exactly in that same kind of mindset.
I guess if you can't talk to the hiring manager, you do have a company, hopefully you have a contact at the company and you're not just submitting to a VMS. If you are just submitting to a VMS, do the best that you can. Hopefully there's some way that you can give feedback. But if they are biased, if they are like, hey, this is toxic, just cut your losses, honestly. If you can't do it and you know that you can't continue hiring in good faith because they're just looking for or just they're just toxic, whatever, find a different client. Especially, I guess, the staffing agencies, if you're a staffing agency and you can't talk to the hiring manager, it's already not the closest relation. Maybe I might come from a background, because my agency, we usually do get to talk to the hiring managers. We do have more contact, we do have some human contact other than a VMS. But if all you have is a VMS and they're rejecting people because of, because of bias, just cut your losses and stop sending people to them.
And maybe that's one of the status quos that you push back on. It's why can I not talk directly to the manager? I'm the first one this candidate talks to. If I don't put your company in the best light, then you will not get the best. I know that's not always possible due to the industry, it could be, but definitely that would be one of the things that I would try to push back on. If you're in a sourcer in a staffing company, research or whatever that is, and it's because only your recruiters are allowed to talk to the client, then that's definitely something you can change. Because from a sourcing point of view, I've always said we are the people in the kind of process that need to understand the job better than anybody else, because we are, regardless of whether we actually talk to the candidates, we are the front line. We are the first interaction they have, because we are the one, based on what we think the role is, we're the one that does the filtering of who we think would be right for the role. If we do the outreach, then whatever we put in that kind of initial contact is going to represent that company as well. So we should understand the job, the company, the team, what the culture is, and all of those things around it, because it will come across in the way that we communicate. And definitely, if we do the kind of upfront screening as well, that will be the questions that we will have to answer.
Yeah, I think we've got to have our own better morals, our own red lines. So we talk about the culture, the values of our organisation. We've got to think of our own culture, our own values, our own organisation. So what am I prepared to do to get the deal? What am I prepared to do to hit my targets? What am I prepared to do to land this job? Am I prepared to compromise what I believe in order to get a hire? So if someone says, I only want white men, am I prepared to do that? That you are or you're not. If you're not prepared to do it, you've got to say, I can't, I won't. And if your company doesn't support you in that, then you've got your own cultural issues going on, not let alone the people you're trying to hire for. So at some point, you've got to work in an environment where you can bring your whole self to work and say, I'm not prepared to work for a client that is homophobic or is racist or is sexist. And if someone asks me to do something that is sexist, racist, homophobic, or whatever to think of, I need my company to protect me and look after me. Or why am I here? Yeah, I'm getting abuse from you now and pressure to be something I'm not. So I'd say, can you push back in your organization? Your company's got to have its own ethics and morals and values, and you have to align with those. If you align with them, then as an organization, you can push back to the client, not just one voice. I think that's where it comes in. And again, you have to know where your red line is and walk away and say, actually, we don't do that. There are bucket shops around the corner that will do that for you. We don't do that. We're a consultancy. We work with you. We value our clients. And we're going to give you a slate that is representative of the people we think are the best for the role. But I also say, do you check the hires? Do you come back later and say, I've given you, over the last 2 years, I've given you all these really wonderful slates of people, and you only ever hire the white men? And so at what point do you go back in history and go, I know whatever I give you, you're only going to hire that person? Then what do we say? Do we say, I ain't doing this no more? I go, what's your red line?
Yeah, good point, definitely. I think I'm just going to jump a bit because it goes a bit to what you just said. There's this common tactic of using diverse slates to add some accountability to the business and to talent acquisition alike. Since oftentimes candidates don't disclose, recruiters are making good faith guesses based on public profile pictures, member of specific affinity groups, common names, etc. Are there any legal concerns of using tactics like this to ensure an inclusive group of candidates who are submitted to hiring teams?
I mean, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, I think we've prefaced that with like, none of us are lawyers in either US or Europe, nor do we play one on TV.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know anything about European laws. I've never sourced or recruited in Europe, so or Europe, or really anywhere outside of the US. So it's really all that I can talk to. I don't know. I guess if people don't self-identify, like, you can make a guess in your head, but
and I think that's kind of what the person is saying as well. Like, we kind of want to have that diversity in the people that we present, and we're doing a best guess on, you know, where we found them, which community, or what their profile picture looked like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, like,
yeah.
In the US, you also, like, you can track EEOC data, and it just goes in its like own little bucket, and it's not attached to someone's it's not attached to like individual applications. So you can view the data in aggregate that says, hey, people have self-disclosed this information. And often it's like a different team. There's like recruiting analytics teams that don't do hands-on recruiting, and they say, hey, here's where our bottlenecks are. Like, here's where people are coming into the process and leaving the process. And a lot of people are leaving at like this place. Like, I would definitely look into that data. But I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to give anyone legal advice.
Yeah, what Sarah was saying, there are many platforms that integrate with ATSs that will do objective-based hiring, so based on questions and specific answers. A company called Applied, they base it on a whole broad set of questions, which are then, the answers are then pushed out to all of their teams internally, and they're graded, and then they look at the hiring profiles. So they're hiring people based on object criteria. Okay, the bias still may occur further down the route when you meet people, but you're getting some affinity bias early on, because you know that everybody in this pack can do the job because they've already proved it, and then who they are afterwards. I think we're in sticky ground if sources are stalking social media to check out the color of someone's skin, their gender, who they hang out with. You know, I mean, that reeks of referencing and bias. You know, and what if they put pictures of their kids or their grandparents on it as their profile photo and stuff? I think what we're doing there is we're moving bias from being unconscious into conscious bias. We're targeting and stalking people who look like we want to look. So I think that's dangerous, even though it is good faith. I mean, good faith by whose perception? By your perception. I don't think if you can't shout about it out loud on social media and say, I've just done this, how do you think it sounds? And people won't flame you for it. I don't think it's right to do. So I think I don't think that's a good thing to do.
Kind of depends with social media. I think no matter where, like no matter what you say, there's going to be some social media you can get flamed for.
Yeah, I think deliberately adding your own bias into that or deliberately stalking people. I would rather see positive action campaigns where if you're looking to hire from a specific gender or non-gender or type of specific race or ethnicity, you tailor the JD and the messaging to people so that, say, a woman's more likely to apply for this role because it talks about all the inclusive features for women. It amplifies the language that women may use or someone who's LGBT may use. And I think by doing that, you end up with more people in the funnel that should end up with more people out of the funnel.
Even when you are sourcing, because like I do think that you can source more than just like putting out a JD and hoping people see it, because that's my whole job. You can still do that, and like oftentimes if I find information out, like if I'm tracking down someone's email and I do like go down a rabbit hole, I see like every blog they've ever written, just like paging through like, oh hey, they left their email on this like article, like hey, contact me with questions. Like I do that. But then there's information that it's like, okay, I have this, I know that I'm finding this like diverse slate because like they put this information out. I'm not going to pass that along to my hiring team. Like there's information that like it stays with me and I'm going to take that out and give hiring teams information that's been, I guess like, or so I run a group called Queer Tech Club in Chicago. So I get lots of LGBTQ plus tech professionals and they come and, you know, people come to that group all the time. They say, hey, I'm looking for a job. If I find someone at QTC and we don't actually ask anyone how queer they are to come because that would be a really weird question. But I usually will say, hey, this is a friend of a friend, as I pass that along. Like information that I have that I know, like I'm going to do what I can to make sure that information doesn't get passed along and then bias the hiring team.
But also, I mean, a group like that, from my point of view, would be the perfect place to, if you are in doubt, like how inclusive, if you like Joanne said, you need a friend, you need somebody to just run your ideas by, like the outreach that I'm doing, am I doing it right? Is it like, is this the right? Then, you know, go and meet people at an event where, you know, like Sarah runs a group, you know, Queer in Tech, which is, you know, the perfect place. You will find people who will be very happy to give you feedback on things like that. Just, you know, be honest about why you're there and what you're trying to, you know, what you're trying to learn, what problems you have and how you want to get something out of that.
And I think also you can be, if again, to the size of your organization, you can have hiring days or discovery days where you hire a hall somewhere in a village and say, we're having an LGBTQ awareness day for XYZ Bank. And you make it very clear, we're looking for LGBTQ plus people to come along to this event. We're branding it up. We're making sure that we've used our staff networks so it's authentic and not tokenistic. We've got real experience. I'm queer and I love working here because stories. And you can actually talk to people with a queer experience and find out what they think about working there. And that way, you know it's going to be a safe space. You know that by going there, you get positive bias because you're a queer person going to a queer space. You know you're going to stand, well, ideally more chance. I'm not saying queer people are any more inclusive than the other people, but there's a chance that you won't be slated for being queer as such, or your version of queer. So, no, I think so. If you want to maybe to hire younger people, have a millennials day or a Gen Z day or something, or have a gaming day or whatever flavor of day you can have and target. And maybe you have a white male day at some point, but maybe you don't.
Isn't that what we have every day?
You have that every day. Targeted days. It's positive action, not positive discrimination. You're putting extra effort in. When I talked about equity earlier, you're going out of your way not to treat people the same, but to give people you want to amplify more exposure.
I think this comes a bit to that as well. One of the questions was how to know if an organization is ready for diverse hiring.
Awesome. I think if you're asking that question, it's too late.
You're not, yeah.
Oh no, I meant more like you need to start like you don't build a team and then add diversity to it later. Like that's not a good model. I think the thing to do instead is to sort of start intentionally from day one as soon as you're trying to hire. So you're building, because it's so much easier to like just build a good culture than it is to rectify one that's already kind of off the rails, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's often a problem for startups because they start often with a very small set of people who come out of university together, come out of college together, or they've worked for an organization together. They're, I don't know, they're buddies or friends or whatever, where they met in some sort of network. And often they form these companies and they start off really, really monoculture to start with. So at some point you're going to grow. At some point you're going to need a CFO. At some point you need a COO or a head customer service or some other C-suite person. At that point, there, take the opportunity to think, right, we want someone who's not like us. We really, really put it out there and say, look, we know we could do better here. We need to do this. So then, at that point, there, really, really go full out as a startup and target. Before you get to 20 people, make sure before you get to 20 people, you target some people and do it, and invite them in, saying, look, if you're hiring for C-suite, they should be grown up enough to realise it's not tokenistic, it's necessary for the success of the business. Yeah, be blunt. We cannot IPO if we've got an all-male board. We need you, and you're getting shares. Okay, it's a deal. So be very open about what your problem is and what you're trying to solve it and why you're trying to solve it. And it's when you're fake and inauthentic that people see through that. People will work with you if you're open. So if you're not ready for diversity, you're worried you don't know where to start, that's the point to start. Nobody says they're ready. Everyone's saying, I don't know where to start. So bring in subject matter experts, bring in people who work for diversity consultancies and say, look, how can we do this? There are many project management tools. There are companies out there that will take you through a diversity plan or an inclusion plan and help you work on your culture, help you work on the training of your teams, to look at language, to look at the way you do things, not just in hiring, but in customer service and in marketing, the messages you use, the HR policies, etc. So yeah, engage and start and make sure it's a business priority. Diversity should be at the heart, not a bolt-on. Inclusion should be a heart, not a bolt-on, not diversity.
Perfect. I'm gonna take, I think, 2 more questions so we don't take all of your time tonight. One that I saw was at age discrimination. I think somebody was pointing out that you didn't talk a lot about that. And the person is saying this is one of the acceptable biases that's still very much alive and well. Like how do we kind of deal with that? How do we see that in the same kind of light with diversity and inclusion?
It varies by country, for sure. I was in Ukraine last year, and I was talking to people there about the age bias there is very, very strong. They still come from, well, again, this is my perception, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who's listening, that many people grew up at the time where communism was very, very, very strong, and a lot of the people weren't necessarily allowed to think, allowed to learn, teaching and education and books and things were not allowed. So what they found was that people of a certain age got used to not learning and free thinking and big stuff starting. They came from an environment where they were used to being told how to think and how to work. So this is where a lot of age bias came in, where they've grown up in this environment where anyone over the age of such and such is seen to be old, not necessarily old person. And what seems to have happened is that cutoff at 50 seems to stay, regardless of the fact that younger people are getting into that, who haven't grown up in that environment. So I had this conversation with people, and I found it really challenging, because my view is sit down with a person, think about the age. Don't just think of someone's too young or too old for a role. Think about, can they do it? Think about the lived experience someone who's 50 has. They may have had 10 careers. They may have had children. They've got transferable skills. But often you find that the younger the hiring team, the more they're likely to bias in favour of someone their own age, for various reasons. Some of it could just be they're not confident enough to manage someone who's much older or more experienced than them, not confident enough to deal with someone who is maybe stronger willed or stronger minded because of their age and confidence. and therefore they want someone who's more junior to them, and they perceive junior to be a younger age or similar age to them, where they feel they've got the same amount of lived experience. So that can be the challenge, valuing people's life experience and transferable skills over and above how old they look.
Excellent.
Yeah. I don't know anything about other countries other than the US, but I do know that in the US, protections against age discrimination kick in at 40. So it's, there are like, there are sort of things that you can take of, you know, interviewing someone, making sure that they don't have like the years on their resume, like, or not years, but
Graduation.
like graduation year.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't have graduation year. If like a requirement, if a job spec requires 10 years of experience, and if I'm often like talking to someone as I get the resume and I'm like, oh shoot, this might be something that like the hiring team might cause bias. I'm like, well, show me your resume with just the 10 years and then the name of the school where you got your degree. Like,
or like you still have an AOL address, then you pretty much know that.
Yeah, MySpace.
But yeah, see where you can. Like I oftentimes, like if there's a way where I'm like, if I see something, I'm like, hey, someone down the line from me is going to see this information, it's going to cause like a biased reaction, take that information out, advise the person that you're talking to take the information out. And yeah, in the US at least, those protections kick in at 40.
No, and I think, I mean, regardless of whether that's a legal requirement or not, I love that idea. If there's something that you think that okay, I don't have a bias, but I know there is bias around this. Like ask that person to take it off. If there's something that they don't want to take it off, but they just explain to them, it's like, look, I see it as a benefit, not, but that might be the same down the line. One that I want to kind of finish off on, one person asked, I would love to know your favorite books, blogs, podcasts, etc. on intersectionality, inclusion, and diversity in the workplace. Do you have any recommendations or favorite places or books or things like that you can recommend to people?
I keep an Amazon wish list that I add books to, which I'm happy to share. And every time someone recommends a book to me, I always add it on there. So most of them are available on Audible or as a book. But I try and stretch myself out of my comfort zone. So as a white person, I read books like How to Argue with a Racist and Why I Don't Talk to Race to White People Anymore. I also read books like Everyday Feminism to get real lived experience from diverse female perspectives. I also read a bit about white male fragility and understand about that, and try and understand how different sorts of people work. So not necessarily trying to get a manual on diversity. I want to find out about people. I want to enrich myself, because if I can create an affinity bias with every person, then you become genuinely a friend, genuinely a valued person in my life. And I don't have to think about being, I talked about conscious inclusion and unconscious inclusion. By meeting more and more people and valuing more and more people, I start to lose that you're different to me. And I realize you're just the same. So focus on understanding different sorts of people and removing your bias, challenge every perception you have to try and prove yourself wrong. Go that way rather than trying to prove yourself right all the time. But I'll share my Amazon wish list.
Absolutely, very perfect. I'll put that in the show notes, definitely.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to see that list. That sounds. I'm sort of sitting here like, it's been so long.
Add stuff to it. Add stuff. Go on.
Awesome. I will say, a lot of the conversations I sort of just like follow as they happen on Twitter, and sort of like some hashtag will trend, and I'll just like follow everyone involved in that. That's honestly how I get most of my how I do most of my research. One person / blog is the Inclusion at Work blog. I really like. But I really want that book list. That sounds
we'll get it after. We'll get it over, definitely. Awesome. So if somebody buys you a book on that wish list, is it going to go off, or is it still going to be there, John?
I don't know. I'm not in a cut for them. I just I mean, it's not a huge list. It's just ones that I would read. But I love what Sarah said about just sit there on LinkedIn, follow some hashtags. If it's International Day Against Transphobia and Homophobia, which it was yesterday, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. Follow the hashtags, look at some of the people putting stuff out there. Don't just click like and jog on. Actually dive into the article. Create some conversation. Say, wow, that's a real great point now. Can I just challenge you on one point and get into a conversation? And that will allow you to be comfortable having these uncomfortable conversations and check your understanding. But yeah, as I say, I will share my book list. But yeah, do engage with LinkedIn. There's lots of great conversations. There's lots of great groups on LinkedIn. And if you ask what people's podcasts are, there's thousands of podcasts out there that people will share with you. But people like Lars Smith, I've got my own podcast. There's people like the Secret HR Society in Berlin that have got some great materials. Some of the members there will share stuff. Just ask people where they hang out or what podcasts they like all the time and find something different.
Everybody has their favorites, definitely. Cool. I want to finish it off. I know we're coming up on the hour. Joe, I know you have a big thing going on tomorrow that kind of leads on from this. Tell us again a little bit about the True Inclusion and what it's all about.
Okay, gotta push my button now. Go on, there it goes. There, look, there, my little lower third popped in. So I'm running an event called True Inclusion, which is an online unconference. So an unconference is no PowerPoints, no presentations, no hierarchy, no name badges. It's about people going to a virtual environment to have conversations, to have a chat, facilitated by a track leader, and they're 20 minutes long. So I've created an environment in Discord. So some of you may have heard of Discord. It's a gaming platform, and there's millions of people around the world sharing and chatting in this zone. So I've hosted it in Discord because I wanted that community feel where people could just wander around, have conversations, join in, listen at the door if they want to, and then before they turn their camera on. So it's a real true spirit of not creating too many rules. It's your conference, your way type stuff. So True Inclusion. I'll give you the links in a minute, but yeah, if it's a bit.ly shortcut, True, TRU, capital I, Inclusion 20 to register if you want to go there now. But it's at 10 o'clock UK tomorrow. So if you watch this on Thursday, sorry, it's already happened.
Brilliant. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much for your training last Thursday, your time today, and yeah, for setting up this event. I know you run the event in person, and a lot of people got a lot of ideas from that. But I love that there's the online version now as well. There's no excuse for why not to join, unless you're like Sarah, geographically challenged, and 10 a.m. is a little early even for Sarah. Sarah, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter most of the time at Sarah E. Goldberg, also LinkedIn, or shoot me an email, sgoldberg@oprecruiting.com.
But I'm going to take True Inclusion around the world slowly. So the success of this session, I want to run it at 10 o'clock Eastern time, 10 o'clock Mountain time, 10 o'clock Pacific time, and then APAC as well. So I want to try and get this one out the way. I've spoken to some great people in the US who want to be involved, but it was too early for them. So
I know Sarah has a good community of people that will very much like to be involved in that in the US version.
Yeah, definitely.
It's traveling. This is just the one-off. We've got many more months of lockdown, so we've got plenty of chance to do this and build a world community. Yeah, certainly.
Awesome.
Thank you both for your time and for all of your insights. I hope everybody got their questions answered. If not, we still have both the LinkedIn group and the Facebook group. I know there's lots of people in there other than just Joanne and Sarah that can answer their ideas or what they do with diversity and inclusion. So definitely ask the questions there. This is for everybody. I know it's a big group with the training, and definitely go to True Inclusion tomorrow. If you do have time for it, it's definitely something you should check out. Perfect. Thank you very much, both of you. And I'd love to see you again when we get out of this never-ending lockdown.